Thank you very much. Well, thank you for inviting me. Pleasure to be here. Um, I should warn you that although I am an elected politician, by trade I'm a social scientist. And because I've only got 7 or 8 minutes, I will be using social science concepts. Sorry to disappoint journalists in the audience. I'd like to start with the word troublemaker. I am a troublemaker. It's all right. I'm quite happy to accept this. Whether this is a desirable form of troublemaking or an undesirable form of troublemaking, I'll leave that judgment to you. But the word is semiotically interesting because it makes a negative attribution to another, and by implication a positive one to oneself. So it sets up a positive-negative polarity with liberals at the positive end and the non-liberals at the negative end. It already grasps the agenda and shifts it in a particular direction, which is implicit. It's actually hard to see. Read a bit of cultural semiotics and then you will see what I'm getting at. I do see methodological problems with the report. I did read through it fairly carefully. And I'll say something about this, and then I'll say something about Hungary towards the end. I'm not persuaded, reading the report, that there is a cogent definition of populism. It is a very tricky subject, and I've read quite a lot of literature on it. What I missed is Ernesto Laclau's work on this. He died about 2 years ago. The book is called The Populist Reason. It is even available in Hungarian. Populista is. For those of you who want to read it in Hungarian. Basically, he argues that populism is a mode of articulation, and thereby all sorts of issues which really don't have much to do with one another, are not particularly coherent, are brought into a concept of coherence. This is my reading of Laclau's argument. Second point, methodological point, is it's one I've already referred to, the positive-negative polarity, is that what I read from this report is that it comes from a world of a binary opposition in which there is that which is liberal and that which is non-liberal. And the non-liberal is populist. Whether this is populism of the conventional left, conventional right, in a sense doesn't really matter. It's a way of defending the liberal project, which is perfectly reputable, but I think this is what is happening. If you want to come at it from a slightly different angle, it's a form of classification. And classification is never innocent. Classification is never neutral. It is always value-laden. There's nothing wrong with that. We are all valorizing people. Human beings valorize all the time. Don't believe anybody says, I'm value neutral. It's a myth. It's part of the Enlightenment myth, of course, but it's another story. Now, where I'm quoting here about challenging the status quo and the ruling elite, the anti-establishment. Now, this presupposes that the liberal consensus is the sole establishment, that there cannot be, there isn't and there cannot be another establishment. I don't think this is the case. I think there are several varying establishments, and it's this particular conjoining of conventional left, conventional right into the mainstream that is actually a cause of the problem. That's a part of the problem. The further implication is that the existing liberal elite have the sole right to political leadership. Everything else is populist manipulation. Elite manipulation is an old topos. It implies that the people are stupid. It implies that the people have no agency. I personally object to this very strongly. In a way, what I also missed from this report, and I looked through it very carefully, there is no mention of inequality. Now, we're living in an age of mounting, of galloping inequality, which drives the phenomenon which is described as populist. I don't think that the conventional centre, left and right, liberal consensus, has an answer for this. So don't be surprised if people who are at the edge of downward social mobility, who are losing status probably more important than anything else, turn to solutions, pseudo-solutions, because they are not getting the answers that they want to hear from the mainstream. As I've already said, liberalism is not value neutral, it is inherently ideological, and here I would draw particular attention to our old friend Fukuyama, the end of history. Now, this is nonsense. Indeed, it's nonsense on stilts. Triple distilled nonsense. The idea that history can end is rubbish from top to toe, but it's very dangerous because it closes things down. If I had time, I would now talk to you at length about Bakhtin. Those of you who haven't read Bakhtin will find him fascinating. Literary theory, semiotics, he's somewhere in between the two. Available in English. And the consequences of this closing down is that there's this move towards depoliticizing political decision making. A great deal of what should be political is outsourced to all sorts of non-political, non-accountable, non-transparent actors. The judiciary, for example, administrative decision making, NGOs, the multinationals, the great global enterprises with huge lobbying capacity. The classification problem comes up again, more specifically, I do not accept that Smer and Fidesz and PiS and the Danish People's Party are populist. I think they're Gaullist. You all remember about Gaullism, I don't think I have to specify this. I think it's a category that's worth reviving. There is an emphasis on nationhood, there's an emphasis on national endeavour. It doesn't exclude European integration, as de Gaulle didn't. We can argue about exactly where. One final thought on the methodology, please, do not put things into tables. This is simply a metaphor of scientific argument, a way of making soft data look hard. That's all it is. The data in those tables, do read them. They're a bit muddled anyway. Don't stand up to any closer penetration. If you interrogate that data, you will actually see that they don't belong in the same table. But once you put them there, draw lines around it, oh, it looks very good. I have little time left. Second part, this is specifically about Hungary, to some extent Central Europe. There is this sentence in the report: populist parties have so far not succeeded in directly determining key political decisions. In which case, what is Fidesz doing on this list? Those of you who follow Hungarian politics, maybe not many of you do this, will be aware that since 2010, when Fidesz was elected, there's a new constitution, the ballot box revolution, public administration reform, new institutions, super ministries, the whole country has been turned around radically. Not succeeded in directly determining key political decisions. Come on. I mean, this is why Fidesz is constantly under attack, because it is doing things, not necessarily in ways that people like, but that's another story. But certainly it's doing things. Last but one, I want to say something about the dreaded word illiberalism. Now, Prime Minister Orban used this word in a speech on 26th of June in Băile Tușnad in Transylvania, in Romania. And I can accept that the great majority of people will not actually read what Orban said. They will pick up on the word. It's the symbolically charged, symbolically very heavily charged word, illiberalism, and then run with it. They don't look at the context. They don't actually interrogate that text. Now, I have done it. It is available in English. You don't have to learn Hungarian to read this text. And it is essential, if you want to understand what he was actually trying to say, Prime Minister Orban, as distinct from doing a routine condemnation. So what I'm going to do here is to quote the relevant passage. What we're trying is to find the form of community organization, the new Hungarian state, which is capable of making our community competitive in the great global race. And in this sense, my emphasis, in this sense, the new state that we are constructing in Hungary is an illiberal state, a non-liberal state. It does not reject the fundamental principles of liberalism such as freedom. But I don't think that could be any clearer. is using illiberal in a very particular, very Hungarian way. It comes from a long Hungarian debate, what liberalism means in that particular sense. A point to what Rosa just said, if I might add that here, when you said that the populists are mostly marginal. So I'm going to say something controversial now, if I haven't said enough, which is controversial. I'm not sure if I actually agree that they're that marginal, because I suspect, and I'm not over the moon about this, that what we're seeing, this phenomenon, we'll call populism for the purposes of this afternoon, is a symptom of the decay of the liberal project. I think we're in the process of moving into a new era, the shape of which I do not yet see. But as far as society is concerned, whether they're citizens, whether they are voters, or just people, let me end by quoting the last part of a poem called The Solution by Bertolt Brecht. If you don't know it, you should know it. It's very short. The people had forfeited the confidence of the government and could win it back only by redoubled efforts, say the German Socialist Party. Would it not be easier in that case for the government to dissolve the people and elect another? Thank you for your attention.